it just blows my mind that I, I could just type away on my keyboard for a couple of years and throw something straight out of my head, out into the world, and it creates that sense in people, of excitement and thrills and sadness and all the rest of it that I get from books. It's like you can't quite believe that you've done it. You read so many books that do it to you, and then you think, Can I actually write well enough to do this, and give this entertainment to someone else?" And so when you get that affirmation, and I've had plenty of negative reviews as well, but when you get the affirmation, it's mind blowing. It really is. It's every message that comes through, that says something positive. People who subscribe to my newsletter and stuff. I'll put a newsletter out and they'll get some bit of conversation back. And yeah, this I still can't quite believe it. It's wonderful. I hope that'll never change. It hasn't changed in the sort of five or so years, 6 years since I've been published.
Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I am here today with author and game developer, Adrian Selby. Adrian, thanks for joining me today.
Hello, a huge pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for accepting my invitation. And we talked a little bit before we went live about, I just want to say thanks again for coming on and chatting with me about your books and your work.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Any opportunity, yeah, I'm gonna take it.
Awesome. Yeah, because I was looking at your bio, and you've worked on a lot of video games, and you have 3 books out. So I want to get to
Yeah.
all that good stuff. But can you tell us about the books you've written and what they're kind of a general what they're about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give it a go. I haven't rehearsed. I've just come straight from work, so yeah, just buzzing around with all kinds of HR and recruitment and project issues straight into this. So we'll see whether how rusty I am. So yeah, so 3 books. They're all standalone books, all set in the same world. The first one, Snakewood. I prepared a little bit.
Oh,
Snakewood.
nice.
Got my books there. Snakewood was 2016. That's my debut, and it's about 2 mercenaries who are now old men, and they were part of a once legendary mercenary crew called Kalen's 20. And they find out near the start of the novel that their former crewmates are being killed off one by one.
Mm,
And it's their story really of sort of trying to outrun the assassin and figure out who's trying to kill them and their old crewmates and why, and they're trying to find those crewmates that are still alive. So yeah, so that's that one. And then 2018 saw the Winter Road. And that's basically the story of a woman called Taya Amundsen. So yeah, if you're looking for a middle-aged woman protagonist in a fantasy novel, I've got you covered. Um, and so she is a former mercenary, and she comes from this place called the Citadels, and in particular, a very wild and almost barbaric area called the Circle, and it's all these warring clans. And having retired with a great deal of money from being a mercenary, she wants to civilize the Circle. She wants to sort of drive a road, build a road across it and a trade route and bring all these clans together and kind of bring wealth to the area. But there's a warlord who's risen up in the Circle, and they quickly come up against each other, and it's about what ensues as a result. She tries to achieve that ambition when the warlord doesn't want her to. And then last January, Brother Red came out again, another standalone. They're all set a few hundred years apart. And Brother Red is the story of another woman called Druna Margosta. And so she finds she's on at the start of the book, she's on a caravan. She's a guard for a caravan with her best friend, and it gets attacked by bandits, and they escape with their lives. And just the 2 of them. Everyone else is massacred, and they
mm,
decide they're not going to stand for it. They're going to go and try and avenge their friends. And when they do and try to recover, all the damaged, carts and whatever, they find inside what was meant to be a barrel of ale. It actually wasn't. It was the body of a child, but of this really kind of rare species called the Oscoro. and so the body is priceless to the. And we'll probably get into my magic systems later, but to the people that kind of are into the magic in my world, and she wants to discover why it's being smuggled, and in doing so she uncovers this huge plot to bring down a kingdom, and so she's up against an evil more powerful than she could possibly imagine.
Hmm.
So there you go. That's the back of the book blurb for all three of those. Yeah.
And it almost leads us into one of the questions we had for you on Twitter is by Mark Peters. Uh, he wanted to know your thoughts on writing mostly standalone books in a subgenre that where trilogies and longer series are more common.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter as well, which was brilliant because it gave me a
Yeah.
chance to kind of have a think about the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. So Snakewood was always a standalone, and the first publisher that my agent Jamie pitched it to was Orbit, and I think he'd sat down with Tim Holman, who was I think he's kind of the head of Orbit, or I don't know what he's doing now, but he was the head of Orbit UK and US, and he was intrigued by it, and just sort of went for it, as a standalone. So I think Orbit, um, will take standalones. I think they'll take anything that excites them. I think that's the
Mhm.
case with all publishers. If a commissioning editor reads a book and they're like, this is brilliant, the world has to see this. I'm not sure that they would worry particularly whether it was a standalone or a trilogy. Having said that, I think a trilogy for a debut author, an unknown debut author, is is a riskier proposition possibly for um, uh, Orbit or any publisher, because they're taking on effectively three books without knowing whether even the first one's gonna make a big splash, and so for them it's possibly a lower risk. And so if the story's good, they're keen to do it. um, it didn't make a massive splash, as it turned out. Like it's a very Marmite book. Goodreads will tell you that. I think for a long time there were as many. I think I was tracking it for a while before I realised it wasn't healthy. But for the longest time there were about as many 5-star reviews as 1-star reviews. It was. I think it's gradually you know gone on the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Um, and so it really divided readers, because it's the way it's written is kind of not too standard. It's epistolary and there's challenging dialects and all this kind of stuff. So for whether that was the reason or not, I don't know, but it didn't do particularly well, but well enough, I think. Orbit thought it was cool. So then Orbit came back and said we'd like to do two more standalones.
Mm.
And I think possibly, if you're thinking from a business point of view, it's just like I think the book established that I was credible as a fantasy author. That I had an interesting take on magic, and hopefully, and I've been, as in the feedback I've had is that I've got a fairly original voice in terms of my writing style. So I think for Orbit, it was, if you've got a standalone and you still believe in the author, maybe uh, two more standalones, or one more or two more. In my case, it was two more standalones. Almost give you a chance to relaunch the author, or to represent the author without having to tell readers to go back and read the first one because it's the second one of a trilogy and it doesn't make any sense on its own. They can almost say, hey, here's another book by Adrian Selby that you can just pick up and read.
Mm.
And then the hope possibly then is, oh yeah, I enjoyed that, what else has he done? And so I've had some great feedback in amongst the various critiques and comments that you track on social media and stuff, saying that it's actually quite refreshing to not have three books before you, that you can one and done, you can just get through and have a complete story in 500 pages, and know that that's all you need to commit to. So I think it's definitely less risky for a publisher, and and at the same time, it maybe gives the publisher more options. Obviously, if it went gangbusters, they may have turned around and said, "Hey, can we have a trilogy? Could we lock you in effectively?" Um, I had a lot of pleasure writing completely separate books. Yes,
Mm.
in some ways, it's more work. I don't know, because I've never written a trilogy. I'm about to embark on something that's going to be
Mm.
super huge. It's kind of crazy. So maybe I'm talking out of my backside, but yeah, definitely. I I I th- I know what he's getting at with lots of trilogies and things, but I'm not sure publishers worry too much. They just want to find and sell great stories, however long they are.
Mhm. When you had your first book, Snakewood in mind, did you always think of that as a standalone before you started to pitch it?
Yeah, definitely. It was always one book. Yeah, I'd read a lot of fantasy trilogies, obviously, and you think, oh, I'm going to write a fantasy story. It sort of has to be a trilogy. It's the Tolkien thing that's just imprinted in your DNA. But it was possibly because, and it's not a spoiler in the sense that the first few pages reveal it, but the main character Gant, as Gant and Shale are kind of the two main protagonists. And Gant takes an arrow to the stomach, which is poisoned, and he manages to get it mostly out. But basically, he's slowly dying, and he
Mm.
has to get. He decides, right, I can't fight anymore. I want to get home to be put into my own land, into the earth of my clan and stuff. So the story really is about him, obviously, with this assassin bearing down on him and the old crew. He's trying to get home to die before he dies. And so in that respect, it was always the clock was ticking from day one on this protagonist. So yeah, it was one book, always one book.
Is there anything that connects the three books together? Is there Easter eggs you've put in there that connect the three?
Yeah, there are. None of it was preconceived particularly. I think I thought about it more with the second one. So Snakewood, of course, I did, and that was kind of a one book deal effectively. And then Orbit came back for two more and said, can you tell two more stories in this world, please? And okay. So I need to think of two more stories in this world. And Snakewood was the kind of seed for both of them in a way. There was writing Snakewood and the work that I did to ground that in that world and its history, through up to interesting stories that are about a couple of hundred years apart. So I think Winter Road, which is the middle one in terms of like my second published one, is the oldest. Um, so in Snakewood, there's an organization that they come up against, or they sort of a passing kind of connection with, called the Post, which is kind of like the Catholic Church meets the mafia meets the British and Dutch East India companies. It's this huge commercial trading empire that actually has its own armies and things, and it's got its fingers in every pie, and it's pretty corrupt. It's a huge thing. Um, and so I wanted to tell the origin story, and I had this idea for the origin story that it started with this one woman, and she's now forgotten. But it's the story of how she built it with this single road through the wilderness, and how that from that came, this huge empire. And so there was that. So there was nothing in Snakewood that connected back. But then when it came to Brother Red, which is the most recent one, which is in the middle, the Post has these kind of elite agents or assassins, kind of like their equivalent of 007, their equivalent of like this group of James Bonds, these super hardcore kind of characters, called Fieldsmen. And I thought it'd be cool to tell the story of the first Fieldsman, and again, a woman who subsequently was forgotten as the first Fieldsman. And given that given it was in sort of in the middle and not ancient history in terms of the first book, The Winter Road, and Taylor Amundsen, who started it all off, I was able to put in a little Easter egg there about these letters that Taylor Amundsen had written, and that Druna, the character in Brother Red, the main character, reads, and understands exactly what happened back at the start. And then at the end of Brother Red, because it's before Snakewood by about 100 odd years, I was able to put something in the epilogue that throws you out towards Snakewood. So you can read them in any order, um, but whichever one you read, you'll see there's very subtle connections. Obviously, nothing plot wise, but just these little kind of asides back and forth. So if you read all three, hopefully you'll get that little, like you say, those Easter eggs that hopefully be quite satisfying. I know one reviewer who enjoys the books had got in touch with me when he'd finished Brother Red, and was because he's really into them more than he'd read them not that long ago. When he came to the end of Brother Red, he's like, I can't believe what you've just done, in terms of, what you've set up and what you've said, and how you've made that work, and he was delighted. So I was like, yes, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a little bit in there.
What does that feel like for you when one of your readers reaches out to you and says, "Oh, that was great." What does that feel like for as an author?
It's absolutely immense. It's indescribably good. I was at a friend's last weekend watching the rugby. Well, she's Irish, so we had the Wales Ireland game on, and we were just, we were talking. He was asking me how it was all going and that, and you said, how's it selling? How's it doing? As in you got a reprinter, and he said, no, it's not doing particularly well. I said, but to be honest, that's right. One of his friends was round as well, and he was asking. I said, it kind of doesn't matter. Like I
Mm,
don't worry about the success because kind of everything. I've got a job, and like I'm paying the bills. There's writers who obviously it's a lot more important in terms of keeping the lights on, and I've got all that covered. But to have some of the people say what they've said, like people who said they've been moved to tears, or people that just thoroughly enjoyed it, anything positive or whatever. It just blows my mind that I I could just type away on my keyboard for a couple of years and throw something straight out of my head, out into the world, and it and it creates that sense in people, of excitement and thrills and sadness and all the rest of it that I get from books. It's like you can't quite believe that you've done it. You read so many books that do it to you, and then you think, Can I actually write well enough to do this, and give this entertainment to someone else?" And so when you get that affirmation, and I've had plenty of negative reviews as well, but when you get the affirmation, it's mind blowing. It really is. It's every message that comes through, that says something positive. People who subscribe to my newsletter and stuff. I'll put a newsletter out, and they'll get some bit of conversation back. And yeah, this I still can't quite believe it. It's wonderful. I hope that'll never change. It hasn't changed in the sort of five or so years, 6 years since I've been published.
Oh yeah, it's got to be a great feeling to have readers reach out to you like that. And for Snakewood, how long was that brewing in your mind before you started to get serious about writing it and let's try to publish this thing?
Um, about 25 years or
Wow.
something crazy. So I remember sitting. I was back at home, living with my parents before I went to university, and I used to listen to, oh God, I'm going to get hated for this. Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, and there's the track. I think it's the penultimate track, which Brothers in Arms, and it's very moody and thunder and stuff like that, and it's about. I just visualize listening to that. It's very atmospheric. Got my dad's stereo and everything, and I just visualize these two old soldiers, and kind of this friendship between these two beaten up old kind of guys who are just completely past it, and maybe looking at the end of their lives, and that was the genesis of it. Yeah, and and there's that anecdote, oh, I'm writing a novel. Oh, really? Neither am I. It's a kind of a classic kind of a joke, and I would call myself a writer, but never did any writing. And then I got to about 35 years old, so that's yeah, I'm 52 now. Dare I say it? That's yeah, it's a good while ago, nearly 20 years ago. And I just got to that point where it's like I'm either a writer or I'm not. I need I just need to write a book or stop kidding myself. I guess I just got old enough. It was just like you need to do it, Adrian, because I guess inside me I was getting more and more frustrated with myself. And maybe I was being too hard on myself, got young children and everything, and a family and a new career at the time. And that was taking up all the hours. In video games. I did my fair share of crunch, but I just got to that point where I just thought I need to get my head down. And I hadn't done any research, and I knew that I wasn't equipped, if you like, to write a seriously good novel. And I thought, well, if I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to just buy a load of research books. There was not really any internet or World Wide Web to speak of, and then I mean, sure, well, there probably was, but not. Not the richness and depth that you can access anything now. It's grown. It's hard to believe how
Yeah.
much the internet's taken off in terms of your ability to find research. So I bought books on medieval horse breeding, and I bought books on, medieval economies, and I thought I need to know this stuff. I don't feel confident in, them rocking up to some village and not really knowing what the villagers do and stuff. I know it sounds crazy, but I think that was where I realized to myself that I need to put the work in to to feel confident in the reality of the world that the story I was telling, because I could do the whole D&D thing and just, oh, it's a few chickens clucking around and the kind of stuff that you breeze through watching, TV shows, but I thought that's all set dressing, and I need them when they talk to someone to be talking to someone who's living a life in that world. And so I just took years. I got a on this. I'm pointing because I want my OneNote there. I can see my link to my OneNote, and my OneNote has got, it's just voluminous amounts of kind of fantasy research, and I spent years doing that, and then felt ready to write the story, and then wrote the book, and I got to the end of it, and I was over the moon. I've completed the book, I've done it, and then so I was about 40. That was about 10 years ago, yeah, something like that, and I thought, okay, well, I'll send it off to agents. I'll give it a go. So what could possibly go wrong? And then the second agent I sent it to, Jamie, got back and just said, I absolutely love it, but I want
Mm.
to sign you up. But I couldn't believe it. I've been to talk since, and people say, oh, your first book never gets published, and I'm like, sorry, sorry, everyone, I got published first time. Um, yeah, and that was like any person who writes their first novel, you think it's going in the drawer. You have no conception that what you've done is credible in any way, or could be enjoyed by anyone else. You just get through it and think, I've done my best, and if it don't work, so I actually started the one I'm starting now is the one I started straight after Snakewood, because I thought, well, that's not going to go anywhere, so I'll just get on with this kind of spec fic semi sci-fi thing, just as a break from all that fantasy and research and everything. And then obviously that changed the moment that Jamie came in and said, I want to sign you up, and I want to see if we can get this published. And yeah, and it's a roll on 6 years. Here we are.
Oh, that's awesome.
Quite mad. Yeah.
Yeah, the second one who caught that's really good.
Yeah. It's just bonkers. And I think I got a bit lucky as well, because I think at the time, so Jamie's with this agency called the Ampersand Agency, and he hadn't long started. And ultimately, I've got George Martin to thank for all this. And is this Stephanie Meyer that wrote Twilight?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've not read it, so if I got that wrong, apologies to all the Twilight fans. Um, he joined the Ampersand Agency because Peter, who runs the agency, was seeing the explosion of YA at the time, and particularly Game of Thrones, the TV show, the first season, second season, whatever. It had, it was kicking off and going gangbusters, and they were like, well, there's a market here for these things. The market is growing massively for fantasy. People are buying those two titles, or, particularly, and then reading on. Said we need to try and get some of those books ourselves, get some of those authors signed up, because clearly it's good business. And so Jamie was, I think, hired because that was his passion, that was his thing, that's what he was into. And so he didn't have many people in his stable when he came to my book. So I think I've benefited from him not being incredibly busy with like 25 authors or something, or however many authors agents have. He only had like a couple on his books, and so I think he had time to really focus on the submission side of it, as opposed to the contract negotiations and the pitching and all the other side of it, and all the rights side of things, which obviously he's now doing incredibly well. He's got some amazing authors. He's going really well. So I think I got in early, when Jamie had the time, if you like, to take my submission and give it a good read. And then we met up. I think he was a little unconvinced initially, and he said, I'm not sure this is quite the right first book for you, but let's have a chat. And I was like, oh god, yeah, brilliant. So I'll get on the train. I'll be anywhere. I'll fly anywhere. I'll run. I'll swim. I'll do whatever to have a chat with an actual, live chat with an agent. Um, and yeah, and we got on really well, and just yeah, we took. He's a big gamer, I think, so we talked a lot. We talked a bit of League of Legends and MMOs. I think he was World of Warcraft, and I was more Lord of the Rings Online, and
Mm.
we just hit it off. We just thought he just like, cool, okay, but it gave me a chance as well, which is good fortune because not many authors will get this chance, of course, to sort of talk more about the book, and what I was thinking with it and how it fit in my head in that world and stuff. And I, I think that context gave him enough to understand why I'd written the book I'd written and why it worked and what we could do with it in order to get it ready for publication, or get it ready for submission to publishers. So that was an invaluable chat because I think off the back of that chat, did properly sign me up and kind of knew what he was doing with me, and with the book.
Wow, that's great. So the project you're working on now is you said it's not fantasy.
It's not fantasy, no. It's well, never say never. It's a bit of it's a strange one. So I don't know whether it'll end up because it's 5 books plus a bunch of journals plus a series of text messages between 2 women over 40 years,
Hmm.
all intertwined. I don't like that's my current conception of it, and it's it's not going to be an easy pitch, but it works in my head. But the fact that I've only ever written 3 standalones, and now I'm going to take on possibly a 5 book series that has narrative threads between quite different media, which won't be in book form. Um, yeah, it's like it. I need to tell the story, but yeah, whether it'll stay like that, I don't know. But it's basically starts off in this world, our world, hence the spec fic as opposed to secondary world fantasy or whatever. But it quite quickly goes off world, and it's a girl from my hometown of Barry, because why not? Could be London, could be New York, but no, let's make it Barry. Write what you know,
Yeah.
and it's her adventures with a kind of a quantum computing demigod that's in the shape of a denim jacket that she wears, and their adventures and her trying to get home and save the universe ish.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. I'm loving it at the moment. Like all authors, when you just start on the new thing, you're just super excited and you're getting straight in. But once I get to the end of this book and I've got all these narrative things to worry about, I'll probably start to get the usual stress that I'm sure all these trilogy writing authors are familiar with.
How are you keeping track of everything that because you're planning on 5 books? How are you keeping track of all the different storylines and the locations and the people? How do you keep track of it?
Um, so they're kind of 5 standalone adventures that have a narrative thread through them, so that's not so bad. So I've been able to just sketch those out, and in that respect, that's why I'm expecting it maybe to change a lot. With this one, similar to the other books, I have to have a chapter by chapter to sort of before me, but then it changes. I don't know whether they call that an architect, a gardener, or whatever, but it's where I need to know roughly where I'm going. I need to, if you like, have some confidence there's not a saggy middle, that the pace stays good, that it maintains, or the excitement ramps and ramps and ramps. But then when I get into it, I think ideas then happen, and offshoots, or actually it would be even cooler if I did this. That'll send sometimes can be quite minor and worked in, and other times, like with Brother Red, can change the narrative almost entirely. I think I said this, at a previous interview. Um, in Brother Red, I was writing it, and the main character Druna gets off a horse to meet this clan leader and his entourage, to ask them about this stuff related to this body that she'd found, and among them is one of these Oscaro or Sosi, actually a related tribe, so they're kind of these half plant, half human. Uh, and it was just as I was writing the actual sentence, long after I planned the book out, I just thought, oh, she's going to fall in love with her. She's going to lay eyes on her, and they're going to fall in love. And it sounds ridiculous, like love at first sight is possibly frowned upon. I don't know, but I just knew. I just knew that as soon as she clocked her, she was going to be all in. And I thought, right, okay, so that changes everything. So they're now going to be kind of together in the novel. So the plot I had to be reworked, but it was obviously a pleasure to rework it. It enhanced the book.
Hmm.
I'm expecting that to happen this time. I've got a thread. I kind of know where it's going, but yeah, hopefully some good stuff will I'll join the existing plot and enhance it and make it better.
That sounds great. And I wonder, after Snakewood and after Orbit contacted you and said, "Hey, we want to do two more books, two more standalones," how did your process change at all after they contacted? Let's do two more. Did how different was your approach for the second two books?
Um, I think I've thought about this a lot because someone said, "Oh God, it must be really hard to write a book." I think I got asked that, not too long ago, and I just said, actually, it's not that hard now. I just sit down and I'm writing, uh, and I'm aware that that's crazy. I'm not fretting or thinking about it. I'm just saying, right, I need to put a plot together, and I need to do some character biographies. I need to do my research on, like, much of this book takes place in the Midwest. So, like, there's a chase across. Is it Interstate 74? I think it's Interstate 74. So I need to do the research for that, and it's just knocking these things down. Your research, your bios, your plot. Chapter one, begin. And it's a recursive process. It's an iterative process where I realize when I'm coming to a bit of description. Oh, actually, what birds, when she wakes up in the morning to bird song, actually are in Colorado. It's not going to be, what's in the Midlands or whatever, where the book starts near the Midlands, or it goes to the Midlands pretty quick in the UK. Let me just check, and then let me, go again, going back to the point about the research. I can quickly go on YouTube and listen to the bird song of birds from Colorado. You can find a YouTube video on anything, and I can just listen to it, and describe it and so on. And it's not a big thing. I believe I'm going to complete it. And so when it came to the Winter Road, and it was because I didn't know what I was going to do for Brother Red. I had all kinds of trouble figuring out what Brother Red was going to be subsequently. But when it came to the Winter Road, I thought, well, I kind of know what Taylor Amundsen needs to do, and she's going to build this road, and there's going to be a problem with there's going to be an antagonist, and much anguish and combat will ensue. I just kind of got my head down and did it, and I think that comes from having finished one. So to any authors out there, who's scratching away at a book, don't don't worry, finish the thing, to give yourself that confidence and self-belief. I can write a book, because writing the first book is the hardest. It took me 20 years,
Mm.
which is, like you say, I think that's probably what you get at, isn't it? 20 years to write one and then 2 years to write the other. I think a publishing deal helps, right? Like, saying you got 18 months to write this book. So if you want some money, oh, good. Yeah, and all the motivation is there around, being published, and all the excitement that comes with that. But where, you might understandably think, oh my God, it took me 20 years to write the last one, I'm never going to write the next one in 2 years. That wasn't there. And I think it was just the confidence I got from the first one, and obviously the confidence you get from getting published, and that's not particularly sort of good advice to give a reader. Hey, did you get published? You'll be fine. You'll be really confident. Yeah, of course I will, Adrian. Yeah, nice one. But it was the completing of it. I think the sense of completing Snakewood before Jamie and before Orbit, I was kind of at peace with myself. Like, I just knew I could do it. I knew I could write a book. I could see it through. It was hard. It was a mountain to climb, all the usual kind of metaphors. But I got there, and so I thought, I've done this. It's going to be another mountain to climb, and you're looking at staring up at the mountain ahead of you in terms of your outline and everything, and you're like, is this going to be as good as the last one? I have no idea, but the clock's ticking. Get going, and just
Yeah.
just get on with it. Yeah. So the process didn't change so much either. I think I just did a lot more work in a lot less time. Fewer excuses, again, your mind is concentrated by the contract you sign, but also, it's a thing now. You're a writer now. You believe you're a writer now, and just get on with it, right? And obviously you got all the encouragement in the world then to crack on.
Mm. Yeah, it does help to have that motivation of we have, the time is ticking. So
Yeah, yeah, completely. Yeah, and now I haven't got that because I haven't got a deal. It's I've taken some time out, but right now I'm back as though I've got a deal. Like I want to get the first draft done this year, and I'm finding the mornings, and I'm finding, like an hour in the morning before I start work, or evenings or whatever, squeezing an hour or two in. I keep my Sundays aside, and I'm writing all day Sundays, and I
Mm,
just trying to. I'm in the same place that I was, because I know that that's how you get a book done in a year and a half, 2 years. Is you've got when got a job and all the rest of it, is you just got to find those slots. But having done that for a number of years, got into the discipline of that, take the contract away, but the mentality is still there.
mm,
I don't know whether this will get published. It may end up on Kindle, or self-published or whatever. I don't know. It that doesn't matter. But I know what I need to do if I want to get it done before before I should die of old age, is to just get the same mindset into my working days and weeks and stuff. So yeah, so I'm back on the saddle.
no. And how important was it for you and just your own mind to have a little break between the last book and this new project?
So I needed it. There's stuff that kind of went on in my personal life that was pretty hardcore, like really emotionally challenging. And it's not something for this podcast. But it was a really difficult time for me and the family, and I was in a new job around sort of the time that Winter Road was published, and writing Brother Red. So I kind of had the two books were kind of in my head. All this other stuff was going on, and I got my most responsible position to date. It's now changed. I've got even more responsibility. Running the production for a video game on my own, whereas previously, I was a producer reporting to a lead producer or an exec producer. Now I was the producer running production for a title on my own, and all of that combined, I got to the end of Brother Red, and finished it, and I was kind of done, and I was struggling with my mental health and everything as
Mm,
well. So the break was, it wasn't just, just chill out,
right.
just going to relax and just let the juices flow. I was actually burnt out, I think, and so it was, I couldn't get another book out. I needed to take some time. It was sort of just as well that there wasn't another deal. Orbit, this stuff kicked off, a bit earlier, and Orbit were incredibly understanding about adjusting the timeline for one of the books. So I'm sure they would have been as understanding had there been another deal on the table for this next thing. But the fact that there wasn't, I just thought, okay, I'm just going to stop for a bit and focus on the family and the stuff that was going on, and focus on the job and getting this
Mm,
game shipped, and doing well at that, because it was on me, obviously not all on me, but the my function within the studio was all on me rather than shared with other producers and stuff. So I really needed that to go well, and
mm,
and do well there. And yeah, and I thought I can't do all that and then come home and then write all evening and all weekend. It just I just sort of couldn't do it. So it was hugely important to take that break. But yeah, sadly, it wasn't just because I wanted to chill out and play some
mm,
video games. Although that is what I did, because I needed to chill out
right.
and just to take the pressure off, and not put
Right.
myself under that immense pressure. Yeah.
Sometimes it's really tough to just admit to yourself that I just need, I need to take care of these other things and I have to stop what else I have going on. Sometimes that's a big step to take.
Yeah, yeah. What surprised me, and again, I talked about, the feedback I had for the books being amazing. Where obviously you get the crazy bad feedback, but then you get these lovely nuggets of, like, people just really enjoying the book. And then I think it was a newsletter where I thought, well, these people are subscribing. I haven't got much content at the moment because I'm struggling like hell, and I just thought, well, I'm just
Mm,
going to tell them I'm struggling. I can't do anything, and you read on various forums and social media and stuff. It's good to acknowledge, that you're having a rough patch. And I just thought, well, yeah, but but I struggled to acknowledge it outwards. I
Yeah.
told the people that needed to know, but I was still in that crazy mindset of, everyone's got problems. You don't need mine on top. You don't need me to be moaning about the stuff going on in my life. And I just, well, I'm going to tell these people that, look, I'm taking a break, and they might not be, and there haven't been many newsletters, forthcoming, because I just can't. I just got to stop. And then I had, the biggest response to that
Mm,
from my subscribers, because they got my email address. They got back in touch, and people again, saying thank you for sharing that and acknowledging it. And then one or two saying, I am struggling as well. And it was very, like I say, reassuring that to see you share your struggle, because it helps me to acknowledge mine, kind of thing. And I wasn't
mhm,
expecting that kind of lovely response that you read, examples of elsewhere. I wasn't expecting people to feel like my acknowledgement of my stuff was something they needed.
mhm.
It's which then made me glad that I'd acknowledged it, and I'd shared it, and yeah. So yeah, that was, I've learned that is a good thing to do, and just to, yeah, you got to take care of what matters, and the writing, it's a solace, but this, for me, and I don't know whether it's different for other authors. For me, I put a lot of huge amount of pressure on myself when I sit at the desk to write something brilliant. I'm not someone who'll just say, well, let's knock out the draft. I know I'm going to rewrite it all three times, so I'm just going to knock out a draft because that's the way I work. My approach, sadly, for all these reasons, is I'm trying to write the final published sentence in the first draft. I can't. If that sentence isn't right, I can't leave it. I've got to. It's got to be brilliant, And obviously, I do have to redraft, and it isn't actually that good. But I'm a perfectionist all the way through. So it takes me longer to get the first draft, and then first draft to final is a very short amount of time. And so, but the problem with that approach where I've been is, again, I can't write that sentence until I've found out what the Colombian Colorado bird song is. I can't, and so I, yeah, it's just too much work. But in that mode, that's where I'm happiest,
Mm.
is trying to write great words every time I sit down. Great sentences, great description, great, something insightful and powerful, and lots of visual hooks and whatever. So yeah, but it's intense,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do it.
Is there someone that you bounce ideas off of as you're writing that say, "Hey, come in, can you read this, or can you give me feedback as you're going through that first draft?"
No.
Oh.
Like I should. It's partly that thing of, who wants to read my first draft? We're all busy, thanks. It's I I'm kind of okay with not sharing it,
Mm,
and that's probably not a good thing. That might be my immaturity. I have literally only written three books, so I've probably got an awful lot to learn. I think with this one, I think the difficulty with the others may be when it's your own world, and they make, I'd be interested. It's not something I've asked other fantasy authors who are writing secondary world stuff, is whether one of the challenges with writing secondary world and having a reader is that reader, they won't have all the context that you have for why, the
mm,
things you're doing, or the places you're putting it, or the stuff that's going on. Like, is this person's motives really whatever? Well, yeah, because of this, and this. Whereas in this next one being set in this world, it's set. I think it starts in Barry. It goes to. I think I'm in Stoke-on-Trent at the moment. Don't ask me why. That's where it needed to be. And then it's going to jump pretty quickly to Colorado, then over to New York via Kansas City, I think, briefly. All of that, where she comes into contact with, she's going to come into contact with a retired pastor, and she's going to come into contact with some students who are in a band, driving to Kansas from, Denver. The authenticity of their voices and their vernacular, and all of that kind of stuff, I think definitely is going to need a sense check from. And I think there's one person who subscribes to my newsletter who lives somewhere near Interstate. I think it's Interstate 74, goes from Denver right away over, because they're going to end up in Albany.
mm,
It's New York or Albany, and I think I'm going to need it this time. Someone to say, hey, this conversation between her and these students, or her and this pastor, is the way the pastor speaks at all credible? Is Denver and the way I've depicted it, or however briefly, a credible depiction? I mean, again, you've got Google Street Maps now, and
Yeah.
that's like the chase through parts of New York. It's just, without it, I don't know what I'd have done, because now I can literally run the streets and see where you get on the subway or off the subway, or and stuff. So that's helped a lot. But even then, that's one thing, isn't it? Just to describe a street and get the positioning of things right in terms of working out whether she can actually make that under gunfire, for example.
Yeah.
Jump, from that place to that place. But actually, what goes on, and how the conversation is in the world around her, bringing that to life. However, in however fleeting a manner. Like it's Stuck on Tread at the moment. She's unconscious after this event that happens in Barry, and she finds herself in Stoke, and there's a bunch of lads that come across her unconscious body, but she's got a handgun, and they're thinking, oh, she's some kind of dealer. So you want the Stoke on Trent vernacular. So because I did live there briefly, but I've forgotten it all, and so just finding the phrases and stuff. So all of that, I think, is, I can only go so far with the American stuff. The Stoke
Mm.
stuff, I think, is a bit more closer to home, but the American stuff, I'm going to need a sense check on all of that.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing what we can do with the internet now. Like you mentioned, we've
Yeah,
come a
yeah,
long way.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just take a lot more time, I suppose. When you probably have to do a lot more traveling and things. Um, and yeah, I say all that. I mean, I did. This is a circuitous aside. I did work with, very briefly, when I was back at Criterion Games. We did a shoot 'em up called Black,
Mhm.
and for a short time we were making Black 2 before we all got pulled onto Burnout Paradise. For those people playing console games who are PS2, PS3, may remember the Burnout titles. And so Black 2 was going to be a thing, and they got a guy in for production design called Nilo Rodis, and Nilo Rodis was this legend. He's made with Steven Spielberg, and knows George Lucas and all these guys. I believe he co-designed Buzz Lightyear,
Oh
and
wow.
I think he designed Slave One as well. But
Mm.
certainly, his costume design, he's done it all. Um, and he was scoffing at some designers he was talking to, that because we were going to set part of Black 2 in the Philippines, I think, where he came from, and he said, you can't Google image the Philippines. You kind of got to go and do the field research. And I always remember that, because for all I'm talking about the internet and everything, and Google Street View, I kind of get where he's coming from, and he was trying to describe how you translate, a properly researched Philippine logging. Um, I think that there was an idea that it would start with you puttering along on some boat up to this island in the midst of this kind of lumber enterprise, because there's a lot of logging in the Philippines. Apparently, so there are all these logs floating in the water, in this channel of water. And yeah, he said you can't Google that. You kind of need to go and fly out there and take lots of pictures and really get us, how hot is the place, and what's the atmosphere of it, what's the light like. He said you can get various other photos. If you need to know what the lighting needs to be, you can't rely on a bunch of photos a tourist have taken. You need to get out there. I'm very conscious of all of that in everything I say. I should really go and travel Interstate 74 and feel it. But yeah, it's I got rent to pay, and food to put on the table for the kids, and yeah, swanning off to a cross country trip across the states is a bit beyond me, sadly. I think he's got a point, definitely. For all that, I laud the internet. He's got a point.
Yeah. And I had read on your biography that Tolkien was a big influence on you. I wondered how did him and his writing influence you and your writing?
I think he's a bit like Star Wars, a seven. It basically, he kind of stamped it into my DNA, that like, as in the captivation I felt. I saw Star Wars when it first came out. So whenever it was first in the UK, which would have been 77, 78, I was literally the first. I was 7 years old, 8 years old, went to the cinema, changed my life, changed everything. I was completely, because of course nothing was like it. You know, you had, um, well, what did you have before Star Wars? I mean, it was Star Trek, the
Yeah.
TV show. You know, when you think about the you know, the spaceships, like all the stuff you'd imagine with your Lego sets
Yeah.
and whatever else, and just drawing it out to have that come to a life in a cinema was incredible. And then I read The Hobbit then when I was about 11, 10, 11, and then I read Lord of the Rings 12, 13, 14. So it it was just the being whisked away to somewhere utterly incredible, you know. And so the story, the stories are obviously incredible. That's why they're so well known. Um, and then I subsequently realized kind of part of the reason they were incredible was the research and the fact that he built this whole mythology and he built this entire world out of you know, and all its histories. And so you know, it's kind of like the research thing, you know, when you've got all that grounding, you know, it's like it makes it so much easier to tell a story because you know the world and the people and what they're about and what their antagonisms and loyalties are and all that kind of stuff. So I think I was enamored of how deeply one could imagine a world out of their head, you know, like the depth. I picked up subsequently the Silmarillion and, you know, read Unfinished Tales and stuff, and I was flabbergasted. Again, I was like 15, 16, so I'm not really formed as a human being, if I'm honest. You know, just a hormonal wreck with spots, you know, geeking out, and just in awe of, like, because I thought, oh, I want to do this, and so you sit down to try and do it for your you know, your role playing with your mates doing D&D and stuff. And you just, I just thought this, how does one person create something so, you know, mind blowing? But I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I thought I want to create a world. I just want to create a world, you know. And I think he gave me that, you know, principally, you know, and this majestic and very moving story. You know, it absolutely tore my heart out at 14 years old, you know. And I've read it. I think the last time I read it, I was in my 20s. I had planned to read it every few years, and I haven't read it for, God, you know, a good couple of decades now. But the last time I read it, I enjoyed it more than, or I thought. I was worried I would enjoy it. It would have lost its magic somehow. That now I was a bit more savvy, and I'd read a lot more widely in fiction and things, that I would find a lot of problems with it. You know, you return to some of your childhood stuff and think, God, yeah, maybe it wasn't that good. But I was still really moved by it, still really blown away by it. You know. But yeah, it was the being somewhere completely else, being sucked into a world and just imagining. You know, I used to spend all the time, you know, just daydreaming about being in Middle Earth, you know, and just walking around the place. I think I was at a thing quite a, you know, for when I was doing publicity for Snakewood. And do you, have you done much role playing? Are you a role player at all?
A little bit, not a whole lot.
A little bit. And so years ago, that there's the Middle Earth role playing game MERP was built on the role master way of, kind of the role master architecture or methodology for, you know, role playing. And the Iron Crown Enterprises was the company, and they did all these supplements, these kind of, campaign books, if you like, that covered, you know, Eastern Rohan, Western Rohan, Mordor, and Plains of Gorgoroth, and all this kind of stuff. And I collected a bunch of them, and in the middle of each of these, you could unpick the staples and take out these big fold-out maps. And I remember being flabbergasted because whether they'd taken creative license with it or not, or whether there was reference to villages, like tiny little villages with proper elven names, or you know, names specific to the region, you know. Um, and it was like the most biggest and most detailed maps of Middle Earth, you know, because you read the one in the novel and it's just got the whole continent slapped there. And then these were breaking it out, and you could actually, like, individual rivers and pathways and things. And I just thought, oh my God, this world is so real. It was like Middle Earth Google Maps, I suppose you'd think about it now, you know, like Google Earth for Middle Earth, you know. And I just used to daydream what it would be like to walk that path, you know, from this one small village to another. In all of that, you know, I guess to reflect back on the influence on my writing, I became fascinated by the thought that there's all this stuff going on with Aragorn and Frodo and, you know, the Dark Lord and all that kind of stuff. But the people in these towns living their lives, who are they? and how are they getting on? How are they affected by it? And I became very interested to tell a story, which became Snakewood of, well, what if it's just two ordinary guys, just who are also not very good at fighting anymore? They're just kind of really old farts, and they were a bit broken up by all the fight brews, which is obviously a magic system thing we may get onto. They're just a mess. And I thought, what if your protagonists aren't capable of taking on, the big bad, and actually this story won't take them anywhere near all that. It kind of adjacent to it towards the end of Snakewood, but and that interested me. An ordinary story set in a fantastical world. Could that be cool? It'll be in a fantasy world, and so that became kind of a driving force. Can I tell a really amazing story that just happens to be in a fantasy world, but is kind of about fairly ordinary people who haven't got the greatest destiny before them?
Hmm. And what methods do you use for world building in your books? Are there certain things that you do or certain techniques you use to build a world?
Um, so I've only built the one, Saroon, as it's called in the books. And I, faced with that conundrum of how you build a credible world, um, and conscious that a friend and fellow author Jeff Matthews is a geography teacher, so he's probably going to sigh and huff if he ever sees this little segment. There's a book called Pathfinders. So I always do this because trying to see whether it's actually anywhere to hand, that I can pull it out and put the title up, and I don't think it is. So it's a it's either true or it's a interpretation or a thesis that civilization on this earth was defined by um, the prevailing winds and currents of the ocean in the various parts of the world. And so the way he evidences it is, so this is a history of civilization in 2 minutes coming up. Um, the Indian Ocean was compared to the Atlantic and the Pacific. Obviously, they're much bigger bodies of water as well. I think. Oh God, you'll kill me, Jeff, if that's wrong. The Indian Ocean had very predictable seasonal winds and currents, and their great predictability allowed for seagoing trade to be an awful lot more successful. And if seagoing trade is a lot more successful, a lot more money is made, and with a lot more wealth comes the ability to be idle and the ability, therefore, to indulge in mathematics, astronomy, and all these other things rather than just trying to find the next, kind of meal. Um, and it also encourages that cross fertilization of knowledge. And so when you look at the Silk Road, effectively, um, you got you've got the seagoing Silk Road, and as well as the actual roads and all the emporia therein. So it's almost like any wonder that therefore the Middle East and the Far East, and through to China and that, all that area was um, culturally and in terms of civilization way more advanced than Western Europe. I think Britain, we were still, living in wattle and daub huts at the time while they were, perusing the stars and coming up with mathematics. Um, but then what happened was, of course, all that trade, all those goods and stuff find their way across Western Europe, and then those kind of from Holland to Spain to France, UK, and stuff, all want a piece of the action, but they can't get a piece of the action profitably. Excuse me, through all the emporia between here and Turkey and beyond, because of course it costs a fortune because you're paying up for all those traders' markup. So they try to set out to find their own route to India and beyond, and that's obviously that stimulates Columbus and this kind of thing. But the challenges, so his argument being the challenges with trying to navigate the Atlantic and then subsequently the Pacific required advances in boat building and navigation itself. That ultimately, when they succeeded to round is it the Cape of Good Hope? I get my capes wrong. Round Africa. Obviously, they got to North Africa first, and that all started, and they cut across to Egypt. But then they went round and got up to Saudi Arabia and Persia and all that kind of stuff. They had bigger, more badass ships, and that kind of better technology, whatever. And so the challenges of those overcoming those oceans and those winds and all that kind of stuff basically bootstrapped their technological progress to the extent that they could then dominate the seas over in Indian Ocean. This is all very crude, obviously, but they basically had naval power, and then obviously you exacerbate that when the South America was discovered, and then the gold came flying back to Western Europe. It kind of all then cemented this exponential growth, if you like, in Western Europe, and its wealth that has since kind of baked in the civilization as we know it. That's a really crude way of thinking about it, but to answer your question, it gave me a way of working out based on a given set of land masses and oceans. If these winds and these oceans are really tricky and these ones are really easy, then all the nations around this part of the ocean, which is what the old kingdoms are in my book, and on the map there's these two continents quite close together, that's a busy trade channel. Therefore all those countries around there which form the old kingdoms are going to be a bit like with the Silk Road. They're going to be quite advanced compared to everyone else. But equally, I realized that what it also gave me as a predictive tool was that all the more far-flung coasts, they they as likely as not are going to prevail ultimately because of the greater challenges they've got trying to access these markets. And so, if you like, you had a tool with which you could draw some land masses, define what the state of the oceans within and the prevailing winds, and then history would almost write itself.
Hmm.
And so it's somewhat credible. Again, I was looking for some credible, because when you got the maps, it's like there's a forest, and then there's a desert, and then there's mountains, and it all seems a bit kind of like patchwork. You think is that actually how it all works? And so I wanted some level of credibility to because the world is sufficiently like our own that you can't, like it's going to be hot at the equator, it's going to be cold up north. If you're going to go with that as opposed to something radically different, I think you then got to think about all those other things and how all that comes in. Like I'd read some stuff. He mentions it in the book that technology travels. For example, when it comes to agricultural innovation, travels brilliantly horizontally and very and poorly vertically. And you think about it, Europe is generally more or less in the temperate zone. Whereas somewhere like Africa, for example, it's got very diverse climates going north to south. So agricultural innovations appear. Again, I would love to be shot down in flames because I would learn something more than this understanding. But if it's more difficult to travel south where the climate and the vegetation and all that becomes very different.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're broadly temperate, then all the knowledge can bootstrap and be shared, and level up kind of everyone, as a result. So there's those kinds of thinking, that you can then say these countries are rich and these countries aren't so rich, and therefore these countries are likely to be powerful, and therefore that then all those economic considerations follow that you can just map out. And again, you don't want to put a Tolkien level of detail into a lot of that if it's not relevant to the book, but it just allows you to understand if they're going to go here, it's likely to be a bit like this and not at all like that, and that to feel credible. If it's got a big, powerful, wealthy neighbor, you can then work out what that means in terms of outposts and political control and all that kind of stuff. And then all that comes to life for you almost, when you want to weave your character in to talk to, various people who are in that ecosystem, as traders or mercenaries or merchants. And I've had some feedback where people say that I put a lot of economics or a lot of industry and economy into my books. Like they feel there's a lot of that stuff in there, and favorably so in the sense that I think they read, these particular readers who obviously commented along this must have felt similar to me, that if it's all just like say a few chickens clucking around, you think, well, how do all these people eat? Or there's one field, and you think, oh no, that just doesn't work. It's thinking that stuff through and realizing that trade and commerce were with the absolute bedrock of everyone's life. The ability to trade or the inability. could cause starvation or feasts, and so I was very conscious of that as my characters travel through my world.
Oh wow. And what are your thoughts on magic systems?
So I struggle with the magic systems that are kind of the zap of lightning out of the pointy finger. I guess, and maybe that's unfair because I think magic systems have come on in leaps and bounds. Like there's a lot of very interesting ones. The the challenge with any magic system, of course, is it's going to fundamentally shape the power structures of the world. It fundamentally shapes the world because magic is if magic is to be powerful at all, and influence things, it's going to therefore have political connotations and military connotations and so on, and it will shape therefore the lives and the cultures of everyone and everything in it. So as long as a world sets out what its magic is and then credibly portrays how that's going to affect all the people in it, assuming they're anything like we are, then that is cool. It's okay. And so so for my magic system, for example, and I'll go into it. It's plant based. So I had this idea that you would like it's herbalism dialed up to 11. Imagine if potions that you would take, or if imagine like herbalism now, where you've got certain roots are good for aches and pains or for bladder conditions or whatever. A lot of the kind of natural remedies. But imagine actually you could concoct them and they were like turning into the Hulk. They were like they could make you incredibly strong. But like if you take sort of really mind bending drugs or you take super powerful kind of stimulants and you're literally just buzzing. Well, imagine that was actually could also be physical and could transform you so that you were you could run twice as fast as Usain Bolt. You could leap really far. You could think many times quicker and more powerfully than anyone else on these brews. But then I thought a bit like hard drugs and heroin and all that kind of stuff. This stuff's got to break you, right? There's got to be a come down where it's just going to mash you up afterwards. And so I thought there's a great risk reward thing there with fight brews where you take a fight brew and you're going to be well nigh unstoppable to anyone else that's not on one. You'll be unkillable. You couldn't begin to take someone on who's on a fight brew. It would just be it'd be like me or you walking into a ring with Mike Tyson,
Yeah.
except Mike Tyson like twice his peak or something like that. Within two punches you probably you'd be dead. You could probably punch you dead in that kind of thing. But then there's this huge come down for days where your body is just completely messed up by this, and I thought that's really interesting. But then if therefore you know what those recipes are, the recipes that you can make these concoctions that maybe give you resistances to poisons and other things, and obviously if your recipes are more powerful or create more powerful brews than your opponents, you will win that battle, and therefore you will be more powerful. Your kingdom will thrive and flourish. So the recipes become more valuable than like when you look at a king's treasure vault, it's actually a recipe book and a bunch of diamonds and gold, but it's the recipe book because it's the recipes knowledge is power. And so that means that I've disappeared. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can still see you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I was in a circle spinning. So then that stuff is going to get grown on farms, and those farms are obviously going to be well guarded and this, that, and the other. But then the trade for these things is going to be powerful. The expeditions that you go on is going to be, looking for them, or the caravans that protect them. Will obviously become like the old, when like in the Wild West when they would go after the bullion carts and stuff like that. So they become the power. They become the thing that defines power rather than gold. Obviously, in our world, is oil and whatever else. But there, it's plant, as I call it. It's the common name for it all is plant, and plant will define the winners and losers, and the best recipes. Will literally make the difference between global power or crushing defeat. So it pervades every aspect of society. You got obviously there being strong drugs. You got drug addiction problems and all that, but equally you've got these homespun remedies, and people obsess about recipes and making all these things, concoctions and things. So So yeah, it has to, as a magic system, if it's to be, like I said, to be powerful at all, it really ought to pervade every aspect of um, everyone's culture and value systems and what they sing about, right through to, like I say, what they use it for in order to achieve their aims as kingdoms and whatever else.
Hmm. Oh wow. And having that come down is really important, I think, to so it can't be too powerful because then it's
Yeah, yeah. There's one particular flower called the flower of fate, and it basically it plays an important part in a couple of the books. And if you eat one of these flower of fates, you you will become the most unstoppable force. You will become like Thor for about half an hour or an hour, and then you will die. Like it will simply melt your insides. But what it will give you between now and then is this insane kind of power. And so there's a mention of an apocryphal story where someone took one of these flower fates and basically took an army out on his own, kind of thing. It just simply couldn't be touched and just cut swathes. Imagine Sauron at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, Peter Jackson's movie, just cut in 20, a side or a go. But that person knew they were going to die, and they were just giving up their life for that. Um, but yeah, the come down's massive. It's so there's a big thing in the books where, particularly near the start with of Brother Red, but it's in the other books as well, where they're thinking, like I mentioned earlier about the bandit caravan, they got wiped out and smashed up, and they said we're going to go back and avenge our dead kind of brothers and sisters, and um, should we take a fight brew? And they're like, oh, can we not? Can we not take a fight brew? Like the easiest thing to do is, oh, let's just swig a fight brew, grrr, smash, 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 job done. But they're scared to death of taking a fight brew because you are gambling with your life. There's stories of like people taking fight brews and then it just goes a bit wrong and they end up clawing their eyes out or just having spasms, just dropping dead and stuff. Like you, it's a really big deal to have to consider taking a fight brew, and they realise they have to. This is the only way because there's about 20 or 30 of these bandits and there's two of them. But yeah, all through, I want readers to have the sense of like, oh, they've got to take a fight brew. This is going to get really messy. This is going to get really, really hardcore now if a fight brew's coming. So they have these things called dayers. It's like 50 cups of coffee or 50 cans of Red Bull. They are, like let's take one of these, which only has a little bit of a come down, but doesn't only gives you a tenth of the up. Maybe that's enough. Just to spare our insides and the risk of death from these crazy concoctions that we're having to drink down. Yeah, so that's its own arms race. To create the fight brew with no come down, which is kind of alluded to in Brother Red a bit. That's the holy grail. If we can get our fighters to just drink this stuff and not suffer the effects, like you've won. Civilization is yours to conquer, kind of thing. So yeah, that's what they're all fighting for. They're all looking for yeah, any remedy that cuts out the chance of getting completely smashed by taking their own fight brew.
the herbal arms race.
Yeah. Which is I say it's I don't read as much fantasy as I should. I don't think there's much like that out there. So it's for anyone stuck with us this far, I can give you a fresh fantasy system that takes all these things sort of into account. So it's very low magic. It is magic, obviously, because what it does, you couldn't feasibly expect of plants on this earth, even if they were genetically engineered. But I just like the idea that you just got to amp it up a bit, but keep it somewhat grounded, and it gets around the pointy fingers, happy lightning thing, which I always struggled with.
And I noticed too from your bio that you when you studied creative writing and philosophy, or I'm sorry, not philosophy.
Yeah, philosophy. Yeah, yeah,
I can't read my own writing,
yeah.
and I wondered um, how much has that influenced your writing or your storytelling, your knowledge in philosophy.
I not maybe I couldn't articulate whether the philosophy had. I remember when I did the course, I ended up absolutely adoring philosophy and really struggling with the writing because I was such a bad writer. I was embarrassingly bad. I didn't get in initially to it was the Crewe and Allsager College of Higher Education because my A levels weren't very good, so there was no Oxford or Cambridge for me. But they had a creative writing course, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer. So I sent my stuff off and it got rejected. And so someone had said, well, why didn't you just go along anyway and take say, another two subjects? Because it was like a dual subject course. I thought, well, philosophy sounds interesting. And I picked modern studies, I think. And they said, but when you get in there, you should be able to just swap, or go and have a word with the lecturer. And that's kind of what I did. I went up to a guy called John Singleton. He's passed since, bless him. And I did try to actually get him a copy of Snakewood because he's in the acknowledgements. Um, I caught up with him, in his room, and I said, look, I'm not here for modern studies or philosophy. I'm here to write, but I'm not. I don't think I'm good enough, but I'm mad to do it. And he said, well, okay, write me 3,000 words on a childhood memory by tomorrow. And I think he was just, is this guy actually serious? So I went home and did 3,000 words on, recollection to school or whatever. And he said, okay, you're in, the next day. I subsequently learned how bad I was when I was reading everyone else's writing in the workshops. That there were some truly brilliant writers there, and my stuff always used to get this embarrassed silence. There was all. I remember I read out the first chapter as was of Snakewood. Back then, like where I was exploring this idea of these two guys and the one getting stabbed initially. And I read, I finished reading. Okay, everyone, any comments on that? And there was this deathly silence, and then someone just said, "The names are pretty good, aren't they? You've invented some really nice names." And I thought, okay, I suck. I truly suck, and that was quite disheartening. But the philosophy was really fascinating. Um, Subsequently, though, and on the writing course, I had only really read fantasy and sci-fi and comics and stuff like that. And then I think the first book they gave us on the creative writing course was Maya Angelou's "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings," and it was my gateway, shamefully, because I was 18, 19 at the time, to literary fiction, and general fiction, and high quality fiction outside of genre, like about this world. And I had no interest, myself. I would go into a bookshop and I'd be straight to the SFF section. And so then I started reading Maya Angelou because I kind of had to. And then I thought, oh my God, this writing is incredible. It's moving, it's powerful, it's just brilliant technically brilliant prose. And and it was this, then there were other books after that. They were getting us to read a lot of modern literary fiction, and feminist fiction and all kinds of stuff, and it was literally just the scales peeled back, like there are great stories everywhere. I mean, there are just because stories are about people, and these were all stories about people and the way people felt and their struggles. And they might have been struggles set in a country home, or they might have been struggles, set in, like say the Midwest or the Deep South or whatever it was, whatever it would be, whether it's 19th century, 20th century. But they were just incredibly powerful books, and brilliantly written. And I realized then I'd been doing myself a disservice as a writer, and I, I was challenged by them. Obviously, there was then experimental fiction I was exposed to, and that I'd never really considered before. And the way you can play with prose, or how you should be telling a story. I remember, for example, a quite basic lesson. I imagine for many writers, I don't know, but it was a revelation to me. There's a book called Ackenfield by a guy called Ronald Blythe, and I think it was a series of vignettes for people from Ackenfield. It was almost like telling the story of the town through a number of its characters. And it may have been the first one, but he was worked in the cemetery. He might have been the grave digger. He dug the graves for the people, of Ackenfield who died. And he chose to tell the gravedigger's story, or give you the life of the gravedigger, or a sense of who he was, simply by not by having the gravedigger be in it at all. Like the obvious thing would be to write, well, okay, maybe it's the gravedigger goes to the pub and talking to some friends, and that's how you find out about him. What they did instead was he simply went into his house, and he just literally walked around the house, almost like with a camera. When you saw photos of him and ornaments and things like that, and you realize that actually he's telling you all about this person just through the things in his house. And it's it kind of feels a little bit kind of really, that's fairly standard stuff, welcome to being a proper writer. But to me, I was like, well, I would never have thought to do that. And so it made me think really hard for the first time in my life And then of course I didn't write for 20 years, but hey, but the lessons burned in, right? You can tell when you approach a scene, what are the best choices to make about the what it is you need to get out of the scene. So if it's about, if this thing has to happen, if this argument has to happen between these characters, or if this person needs to come to some decision, or whatever it is, um, we don't just put your camera straight on them. Think about what's around them. Think about what they're thinking about. You know, what if something changes their mind, what memory is going to trigger it. So I can't. I'm kind of. I haven't got an example to hand here, but you could have a fairly obvious memory that triggers it. So you could say memory, or a memory when I was a girl, blah blah blah, down the beach. I got badly sunburned, and that's why I've always blah 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 blah. But you think, is there something in that memory while I'm there in the memory, describing a sunburned, back, say a girl's back being, I remember getting badly sunburned as a kid, back being bright red and peeling, and go, oh, mum, don't put a shirt on, oh, I can't, you know, is there something about maybe what your mum said, while you're in that place and you're describing that moment, there are choices you can make that can enrich your sense of the mother. It could be the mother just put the stuff on, but maybe the way the mother said something, or maybe the mother sang in a song or whatever, and then she finds herself humming the song. So you can either choose to write the song or not write the song based on how you choose to write the memory. But while you're in the memory, if you add that layer, for example, it can have a resonance to this girl later in life. It could, a cheesy example, it comes up on the radio, the song is playing that it comes. But you don't get that opportunity if you haven't thought about how you could create that opportunity, that resonance, and how you can lift this person in this cafe trying to make a decision. There's a memory triggered that they decide, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to make this change in my life, or whatever. That problem you have to solve. Yeah, you could do it very plainly, or you could think about the stuff around that. It may be that her mother sang her a song, but it may be that she recalls something else about her mother while she's there in the memory that serves no other purpose than to give you maybe a sense of how much she loved her mother, which you might not have had the chance to do previously in the novel. And and again, it's weird how much I got from this Akenfield, because of course you can't just write. She recalled how much she loved her mother, and that's either show not tells, good advice but not great advice. But that is just telling you, she loved her mother. Yeah, you can fly past that sentence. But if there's something in her recollection of the smell of her mother, or the mother's smile, or something there that can connect you to a childhood memory of your own, some universal truth there about how a parent feels about their kid when they're in pain, or something like that, which you then might think, yeah, when my kids are suffering with sunburn, it's, God, I'm saying exactly the same thing, I'm doing exactly the same thing that my parents. You create that thing in a reader, which is just like that's is so true, and you almost get it for free, because you were telling that, you were relaying that information about the sunburn thing. This is not fantasy at all, is it? You relay that information about the sunburn thing, and then you get this beautiful moment of recollection about her feeling towards her mother, almost for free, because you made that choice in what you wrote. And that's why I get stressed out every time I sit down to write a sentence in the first draft, is because I'm trying to do that in the first draft. I'm trying to do that every sort of thing that happens. I'm trying to find a resonance there that can help me to fill out the character, can help me to fill out the world, in some way, just help you to give you a sense of place, a particularity. Because I think the way the mind works when you're reading, because I look at prose, I think, how come I got such an amazing sense of that place? And then you read the words written on the page, and they never described all the stuff that you imagined. And you may find this, you think about, say, the white, the white, what do you say, the flags of Gondor or whatever, when Boromir is dying, isn't it? It's just shining in the wind and stuff, um, and you fill in the parapets and the rest of the place yourself, and this wind and this glorious sunshine and blue sky. You do all that work. Tolkien just gives you through Boromir, just look towards the west or the east or something like that, and then you do the rest. And so for me, it's about, if you can make those right choices to paint the particulars in a way that the reader can easily fill all the gaps, whether it's emotional or visual, in that theatre of, the walking into a tavern or looking across a valley or something like that. Find the particulars, pick them out, and then the reader will read the paragraph and do loads of work for you, so you haven't got to write it all down. Top
How
tip.
hard to find that balance to know how far to go to let the reader fill in? How is that difficult sometimes to not want to spell it out for them?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that right now. First draft, this book, the main character Serendipity, she wakes up and she's got a handgun, which in the UK is a big deal. Like, a handgun is quite a frightening and weird thing to see because there are no guns. She's got this handgun. She's wet herself. She's on this hill, and I'm trying to describe the coming to, the that kind of what is going on, what has just happened, and so I'm picking out what does she connect to. And so she's connecting to birdsong. That part of that Colorado thing was because it's chaffinches, actually, in the Midlands, in Stoke-on-Trent. You'll find chaffinches, thrushes, and a particular duck or whatever. I can't remember the name of the duck. In the lake at the bottom of this hill, and so I pick those things out. But then I thought, well, actually, she wouldn't know the names of those. But because of what just happened, for story reasons, she is surprised by the fact that she knows the names of the birds. Like, how come I know this? And that's me planting a seed. Something has changed within her. So I get to get that for free. I've done the research on what bird she hears, and I've tried to describe the warbling a bit. But I'm then thinking I can maybe reference the fact that she's picked that out and understood it when previously she had no idea what, and neither did I prior to watching that YouTube video. And so it, I've got to the end. This is literally just yesterday. I got to the end of the paragraph, and I think, God, have I gone on a bit too much there, trying to paint the picture in too much detail of her coming to? What do I need to cut? I need to cut some stuff out. What needs to stay? What do I need to cut? Because, like I say, I can feel the sentences dragging on a bit, where I'm getting really into this, trying to get the sense of this sensory overload that she's experiencing. But it's almost like a spidey sense of your own, that you're dragging it on just a bit too much. It starts to feel a bit clumpy and a bit heavy, like you're just making too much of a meal of it. The story's not flowing. Is the reader going to get a bit bored? So I think that's where my editing comes in. Is, like you say, you're trying to get it right. But it's but I have a sense of when I'm overdoing it or when I'm going a bit far. Um, I don't. I tend to maybe go a bit farther not and then rein it back, because at least then you've got a bigger choice of things to choose to choose to slice or reconfigure. But I probably always go slightly over because of this intensity about trying to make every sentence work. I can't, like you say, can't just tell. She she smelled, that she had peed herself. She got up and had a look around, and she saw some rooftops, and she saw some ducks in the distance, and heard a car beeping. There's that's what's happening. But it's like there's actually a lot more going on, both in her emotionally, in her physically, because of stuff that's just happened, in the plot, and it's also not the sense you get of coming to when, let's say, you've got a desperately bad hangover, which is kind of similar to what she's feeling. Well, what does it like to come to from a hangover? I want the reader to go, oh yeah, that's classic hangover. Oh, yeah, that feels awful when you feel like that. So I'm trying to find that, so I can get that connection to the reader, that she has just woken up and she's groggy, but actually the kind of groggy is the groggy you've had when you drunk, way too much wine the previous night, and you've woken up and you're regretting and hating yourself and all the rest of it. What's that intense kind of agony feel like of being really hungover? And then just a couple of sentences of that, and like you say, the rest of it, the reader fills in all the gaps about a hangover, and off you go. Is that
Well,
an answer? Just
I'm taking notes. And speaking of taking notes, you've also been a teacher, and I wondered what you
Ha-
learned about yourself through that experience.
Oh wow. That's a really good question. Um, I learned that I couldn't take the abuse. I couldn't. I couldn't. But it was the most intense job I've had. So I got my teacher training, and uh, I did. I started out on a youth training course. So that's basically conscious of being both old, and it's a very UK specific thing. So you kind of generally leave school at 16, and you can go and get a job if you kind of want. Most people then stay on to do the what we call A levels for 2 years till they're 18, and then they go to get their degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, whatever. Between 16 and 18, if you leave school, or if you're kicked out before, you can't get an employment benefit, or sign on get welfare benefits or whatever, without signing up for a training course where New Way Training, as the place I worked, there would be people who would try and get these kids onto apprenticeships, or they would try to get them work experience in garages or hairdressers, or as with plumbers or electricians, just to try and give them some experience of working, and then in return they would be able to claim their benefits off the state. So it was a way of them, instead of just them sitting around doing nothing, the state would try to give them some for their money. So you can have your 40 pound a week, 50, $60 a week, but you've got to work for it. But hopefully that'll give you something on your CV, and then give you a skill, and give you a chance of getting a job and being a productive citizen. What it did mean, though, was that everyone that came into my class for their literacy and numeracy had dropped out of school, particularly because they didn't want to be in a classroom. So, so I had all these kids that had been expelled, some of them quite troubled. They are from very challenging backgrounds. Some had drug issues, some had whatever. And I had classes full of them, and I had to get them to, write and do maths, and stuff like that. It was quite low level stuff, but just being in a classroom for them was hell. Um, so yeah, I learned a lot, I suppose, about how easy it is to write people off. Like
Mm.
it's a classic thing, isn't it? Like, all these kids were basically amazing in their own ways. The number of times I would say to them, if you spent anywhere near as much time and ingenuity on, you know, pushing your own life forward as you were spending trying to get me upset, I said, you'd be a millionaire. I said, because you're doing really well. I can see you working all the angles to try and wind me up, because they're just used to it with their teachers. If there's a teacher, let's try and break them,
Yeah.
you know. So I realized quite quickly I couldn't be broken. Like I never rose to it, because it was like, yeah, whatever. I can see what you're doing. I can just see because the teacher training does teach you a bit of that, the psychology stuff and classroom management and whatever. But equally, I didn't have the pressure that proper teachers have, who, in schools and stuff, because I could, one, if they didn't do their work, I could just stop their money. So that usually calmed them down. So I had that lever to pull. But also, I didn't have so much pressure in terms of a curriculum or outcomes. I mean, we did have outcomes we had to hit, but basically, it was not difficult to hit them. So I spent a lot of time in the classroom getting to know the kids, and just because it's a way of, well, okay, we'll talk for a bit. Now, can you do some work? It was a way almost of relaxing the situation, building a rapport, and then just saying, look, you do this for me, and it's a bit of give and take, etc., etc. And that's where I learned, an awful lot about how troubled some of these kids were, but how brilliant they were and how clever they were, for all that the school system didn't suit them. That they were really bright. Some of them were incredibly bright, and some of them were, like some of them were kind of like funny and charming and cool and whatever, but they couldn't read.
Mhm.
They'd never learned to read, and so you think, well, you don't stand a chance. And I saw so many kids who just didn't stand a chance. Like as in that your path from here, if you can't read at 16, you can obviously learn to read, and you can obviously go on and get your qualifications and stuff. But this is stuff you should have been doing at 7 or 8 and 9. And so you're now behind, and it's a really competitive world, and you just think, oh, what's going to happen to them? So it was, but there was a lot of abuse. There wasn't a lot of money in it. And then the internet came along, and I got a copy of Dreamweaver, and I thought, oh, I'm going to make websites and become a millionaire. And
Yeah.
that didn't happen either. But I it was it was a very emotional job. Like it was intense. It was very wearing, and I wanted to jump at this opportunity to run my own business. I thought that'd be cool. So I did it for 3 years, and it was a very rewarding job. And I think a lot of teachers would say that, but real teachers have an awful lot of unnecessary and awful pressure on them administratively and everything. But when you meet, now I've got kids, and you go to the parents' evenings and you meet real teachers, you can see in them that care and passion and all that, and you just think these are incredible people. I think if I was empowered, I'd triple their salaries. The work they do is amazing. So I learned that. I couldn't do it, and learned that it was one of the most important jobs, the most important job in the world, possibly, is to be a teacher, for
Yeah.
sure.
It's amazing how much you learn about yourself when you're teaching someone something. You learn a lot about yourself, and
Yeah.
it's definitely. So I wanted to know how you got into the gaming industry. How did that happen?
So that was kind of linked, because I've been a teacher, run my own business. The business went really badly. Um, I lost a lot of money, and I was literally on the verge of losing the house and everything. It was just a spectacularly bad bet, and I was spectacularly ill-equipped. Equally, trying to sell someone a website in the late '90s in South Wales, um, when they hadn't heard of the internet themselves, was also a mistake. There wasn't a big market, you know. So yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why it was destined to fail. But a friend of mine, one of my best mates, he had um, heard about like a job opportunity in games or something. He was an art. He's now a commercial artist. He's been a professional artist all his career, and he got a job at Lionhead. A guy called, for the gaming nerds, Peter Molyneux created a studio called Lionhead, and I think he was employee number 4. He was one of the first people in there because he's such an insanely talented artist. So he got into the gaming industry in Guildford, in Surrey, in the UK, which is just near London, which is one of the big gaming company hubs in the UK. And then when my business was going through the floor, he said, "I think you'd be a good, what they call producer, which is kind of a gaming project manager, but in gaming, they call them producers. You don't produce anything. You just everyone else produces, and you just work out how long it's going to take." And so I went along for the interview for an associate producer at Criterion Games, hence the
Oh yeah.
Burnout Paradise and stuff. And they took me on, and so I was able, so obviously I could keep the bank at bay, and kind of save my skin financially. And then never looked back. I've been out of games since, here and there for a few years, but yeah, I've been in gaming most of my career since. Yeah, so it's quite by accident, I suppose, through a friend, and then I got the interview through a friend.
Do you have any favorite games that you've played? It can be at any point in your life. Any ones that stick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah. At different points in my life, there were different games. I mean, Elite, I think, was the first one I really got into. I mean, the first games I played that I loved were like Chucky Egg and Attic Attack on the Spectrum for the real old school nerds. And then my first PC or whatever, was, or actually I started on the Spectrum, was playing this game Elite, Dave Braben's Elite. Then I think I played that subsequently on the PC. Then it was Ultima Online. So then I think in the late '90s, I was buying PC Zone magazine, and there was an article about this game coming out that was like a massively multiplayer online game called Ultima Online, where you go into a game that looked like Ultima, an isometric fantasy world, but there were other real people in the same world, and you could fight and you could craft and you could hang out. And I thought, oh my God, this is absolutely insane. I can't believe that I can actually role play virtually with a bunch of people in a fantasy world, in real time, via a modem. Like it was a proper phone line. So I was paying like £120 a month in phone bills because there was no cable. I think you guys call it cable. There was no broadband. There was no kind of flat rate. Use as much as you like. I was paying per minute to connect to the internet. And so I bought this Ultimate Online back in 1999, and yeah, I completely consumed. Yeah, it was, yeah, my wife, she has very sour memories of me just being she was a total widow, Ultimate Online widow for a while. Bless her, she stuck around a bit, which is good. So then Ultimate Online, got me into MMOs and all that. That was obviously amazing internet gaming. And then I think in the years since, some of the really big titles that have got me, Half-Life 2 is probably the biggest in terms of the sense of place. It's a great game, obviously it's good fun to play, but the sense of place in Half-Life 2 and the sense of the dystopia that City 17 is, and the art that it's I think it's the production design, the art direction and stuff, the way the oppressiveness, the way that I think it's the Black Citadel or the Black Obelisk, whatever it was, wherever you looked, you and it would be there, and you knew that's where you needed to go. It was this kind of the whole visual grammar of it all was just perfection. I think the game starts and you're just kind of rattling along on a subway, and everyone else is just kind of slumped over on their way to work, and it's just this such an interesting way to begin a game. I know they did it in Half-Life One, where you're on this thing going through the facility, this military facility, whatever, with the experimental facility, but the City 17 thing, and just the bleakness of the place was I just recall it was just incredible. It blew my mind. So that's got me. And I obviously, yeah, I played it. Yeah, I really enjoyed the football manager games, like a manager simulation games. I got really into them because I could just role play myself into being this great football coach like Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. So yeah, I usually imbue these games with my own kind of imagination, which is really sad, and I shouldn't be admitting that out loud.
When, when Ultima Online came out, when it was released, I was living with my cousin. We were roommates for a while, and he was telling me all about how I should play this game. It's so great.
Yeah,
And one day he got killed somewhere. In PvP. Somebody killed him and looted his body.
PK'd. Yeah,
He
PK'd they call it. Yeah.
was so upset. He was throwing things around, and it's like, oh, hope I'm okay.
It was absolutely brutal because yeah, they had player killers. They called you get PK'd, and there was player killed, and so it was players. But when a player killed another player, they become a red, and that basically meant they couldn't use towns, and they became like really scary outlaws, because if you couldn't use a town to get all your stuff and all that, you basically could only survive by killing other players, and to kill other players you have to be good. You have to be good at casting spells, fighting, whatever it was. So whenever you saw a red and you'd see them, they were highlighted in red, you generally ran a mile because you thought this is, like I say, a hardcore PvP. This is the equivalent of the Call of Duty 360 no scoper, that they would just take you out. And in that game, when you died, they could just loot your backpack of all your armor and weapons. You didn't keep everything when you died. You lost it all. So if you had good stuff on you, so I think the problem with that game, of course, was when you got some really good piece of loot, like I think I had a silver sword of undead slaying or something, which was a very rare thing. You kept it in the bank. You'd be
Yeah,
crazy to take out anything other than like a copper broadsword that fall apart, because you could get PK'd and lose all your best gear. So I think I don't know, I think they put insurance contracts in or something later on to address the fact that everyone's best stuff was hidden in the bank, precisely because of what your friend suffered, that you could lose amazing stuff. Yeah, that was frustrating. And obviously a lot of other games have these kind of PVE zones, don't they, where you can't attack each other and stuff. And that's much more my dap these days. But I never get the thrill or the fear than like when Ultimate Online, when I left town to go to a dungeon, because anywhere once you got out of the town borders, you were fair game. And there was a visceral kind of fear to
right.
every minute you played as a result of that fact, and you could lose all your gear as well. That has never been recreated in an MMO for me.
Yeah, I think the only one that got close was EVE Online when I
Yeah,
tried it for a while. And I had a new ship and I felt really great, and then I went to the wrong gate and I killed in like 5 seconds and it was over.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's the real loss, isn't it? That's the frightening thing. It's the real loss. You think, "Oh, that's that's really horrible. I've lost that thing. That's like, what do you mean? There's no way I can get. You'd almost flabbergasted that a game will take something properly zero you, as a phrase I'm learning recently. You get properly zeroed. In other words, genuinely lose something of value, as opposed to lose a bit of time or be inconvenienced and you respawn somewhere and you just carry on as normal. To really take something of value from you is a big deal. Yeah, I think that's why these games are so kind of powerful. And not ma- and it's it's difficult to solve that problem any other way. The only feeling it's akin to is gambling,
Mm.
like when when you're at a poker table or something, and or blackjack or whatever, and you roll the dice, and it it's that feeling of I could lose actual money versus I could win actual money, and the highs and lows of that emotionally. I thought if you could distill that into a video game, and I guess they've done it with loot boxes and gacha, um, in free to play principally, ever since, but they're leveraging that mechanic. But for the longest time, it was like, especially when I was console dev rather than all this stuff now where you can do this kind of thing and these mechanics have become more popular. That was the challenge. How do you create that sense of just true emotional kind of terror and fear and delight in a video game? If you could distill it, you make millions. And they
Definitely.
do now with the gacha. With the gacha, they do, right? Because I'm in free to play now, and I make free to play games on mobile, and that is how you make all the money is through the mechanisms and stuff. I mean, it's changing, it's evolving every year. It's changing, but for a period of time there, like I say, you put the loot boxes in and just count the dollars.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yeah,
So I like to try and finish out every interview with a couple of questions. So I
yeah,
have a
cool.
uh, so the first one is, if the zombie apocalypse happened today, what would be your weapon of choice?
Yeah, I wish you should have. I should have. We should have done these questions at the so I could have got prepared. The weapon of choice. Uh, there's probably a very clever answer here, but I'm going to go with antibiotics.
Hmm. No,
As
that's
in, as in, it's not. Yeah, it's not a weapon. As in, I suppose if you're thinking, how would I fight the zombies? It wouldn't be with antibiotics. But I think if it's an apocalypse, antibiotics is the thing I try to get my hands on as much of as possible.
wow. Very good answer. That's a new one. That's a good one. I like that. Usually it's an axe or
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I was trying to think of what weapon would be good, but I would be rubbish with the weapon. I mean, I'm not at all trained, and obviously you could just say a machine gun with a crate full of ammo. I guess that would be very, very practical for those urgent situations. But if you can get away from the zombies and stuff, I think in apocalypse, yeah, yeah, it's realizing, I suppose, how reliant we all are on antibiotics for everything. And there was a fantasy novel actually, Kazuo Ishiguro, the oh, what's it called, the Berry Giant,
hmm,
and that was the first book in a long time that I think that it's an old couple trying to go to the neighboring town to see their son, and their fear of accidentally cutting themselves,
hmm,
like through a fall, because if they cut themselves, it could get infected, and that's it.
hmm,
And you think, oh yeah, of course. Now I can get away with that in my book because, of course, plant. You can find these concoctions that can give you that bit of latitude as an author. But it was like, yeah, of course, and without antibiotics and all these other things, yeah, one
hmm.
cut, you could be done. Yeah. So yeah.
Good answer. So the next question is, if you were a character in your books, one of your books, would you survive?
Unlikely. Probably because the world is such a very brutal place. And I guess it would depend. If I was a soldier, then no. Like, soldiers basically trade their lives, like, as in they trade years for money. They know they're shortening their lives by decades in the hope that they get these big payouts. So if I was a soldier, yeah, I'd be signing my own death warrant. So I think I would, like maybe a lot of the people in a lot of fantasy worlds, if I could just be a fisherman or just kind of hang out, be a baker, and just keep it going for as long as possible, then maybe, but it would be difficult.
So two more for you. The next one is, what was your first job?
My first, my first proper full time job was a toilet cleaner.
Hmm,
So I finished college and I wanted to get an office job, but I didn't have a suit and I couldn't afford a suit. I had no money. So I got a job as a toilet cleaner in Stoke-on-Trent. There's the link to the new book. at a tire plant, the Michelin. So Michelin tires, they got a massive tire plant. I don't know if they still have in Stoke-on-Trent. And I cleaned blocks of toilets for either an 8-hour shift or a 16-hour shift. And I accumulated enough money in 7 weeks of 6-day shifts cleaning blocks of toilets to buy a suit. And then I moved to Birmingham and got my first office job.
Wow. Well, we have to do sometimes.
Started to do some.
We have to do what we have to do sometimes. Just
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. And again, it was like I say, it's good. It's good. It's good life experience, isn't it? Working and working an unpleasant job for money. It's just like it does teach you something. Yeah,
I had a similar first job. I was like a janitor type thing, cleaning windows and cleaning bathrooms, and yeah, you learn a
yeah,
lot from that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So the last question I like to ask all of my guests, because I like to improve my questions and my repertoire. The questions I have. If roles were reversed, was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
See, I love that because I'm a project manager, and my approach to project management is using this thing called the agile framework, and the agile framework to project management involves a great deal of retrospection and
Mhm.
reflection. So to hear you say that as a agile kind of producer is just wonderful. It's like it really lit me up because reflection and retrospection are things that I'm trying to get my team to do all the time. If any of them are watching this, they're going to be like, "Oh my god, he's going on about retrospection again." So that is brilliant. That is a tremendous approach. As to what I would have asked myself, um, I don't know. I like because I guess I'm thinking, how would I approach this kind of thing as a booktuber and an interviewer? And if I say something, it's just like it's not it's not because you didn't do this in the right way. I think I would be thinking, uh, and I think you've done this organically, I'm trying to think. There might be questions for Adrian about the craft of writing for the writers that could be watching, and then the fantasy readers that could be watching, and I think you've done it, but I would think back if I was in your boots, I've just done the interview. I'm thinking, is there a segment of my viewers that I might not have hit with a question that they might have wanted Adrian to reflect on? Like I think, for example, it might be say the be working with a commissioning editor on iterating your book, for example. That's something we didn't cover,
Mhm.
which may be boring to everyone, and so it's not so bad. Um, but I don't know whether there's a segment of your viewers who are budding writers and therefore think, well, it'd be interesting to get an insight onto what it's like to actually write a book with Orbit. So that would be my only thing, possibly is I'd be thinking, and I'd be trying to very consciously hit the bases. I think the way you've done it, you've got me rabbiting on for I don't know how long. So you are clearly brilliant at what you do. So yeah, don't take that as kind of God, I couldn't do what you do. But that would probably be all I'd be thinking. Is there a question that I can make sure hits a segment? And do I know how my viewership breaks down in terms of they're fantasy enthusiasts, obviously, and sci-fi enthusiasts, but what other things are they? Like I said, you've hit on the gaming, which I'm probably there's a Venn diagram that overlaps fantasy and gaming quite big. I'd have thought.
Yeah.
But that, yeah, maybe that. I did like game pub. I'm just trying to think what we didn't cover, I suppose, and it might have been publishing. But yeah, I think in terms of what we did cover, that's probably what most people would want to get out of it, right? Is a sense of what worlds I've written, how I approach writing, and a bit obviously the gaming's cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for someone wanting to connect with you, and first, let me say I appreciate the feedback. So that I asked that so I can try and improve.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I got to say again how cool that is. Yeah, and to be very open about it. 'Cause like I say, this is on you're saying this live. Give me some
Oh,
feedback, and I was utterly unprepared for that. But it's a life skill, right? Reflection is so important, and that you're seeking it proactively is fantastic. Personally, I think that's amazing. Big props to you for that.
well, thank you. So if someone wants to connect with you, where's the best place to connect with you online?
Um, Everything about where my head is at and my books, in terms of like sample chapters and reviews and other bits and pieces, can be found at adrianselby.com. Um, I'm rarely on Twitter. I usually just check for notifications, and if there's no notification, I don't even bother. But at Adrian L Selby on Twitter, and I think that's about it. I'm only on Facebook as a town councillor, so I'm kind of involved in local politics. So yeah, you'll find me talking about the local library and the lack thereof on Facebook. So you won't find any author stuff from me on there. Just moaning about local issues and trying to put things right at home. So yeah, my website adrianselby.com and a little bit of Twitter.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you again for taking the time, and I think we could have gone for a lot longer, but
Yeah, yeah, possibly, but yeah, whether anyone would have stuck around, I don't know. But yeah, yeah, I'd love to do it again. Yeah, maybe when the next book's out in a couple of years, I can come back and talk about what that project may have become. Because if it's anything like this, there's an awful lot that I'm excited about that potentially not conventional at all about how to approach a story. Not to say it hasn't been done before, but I'm very excited about the fact that it's just not 5 books and that it's going to be multi-textual and stuff. So yeah, when that forms, I'm sure I'll be mad to talk about it in a few years when it's ready for consumption.
definitely love to. Be great. So thank you again, and have a good evening.
All right, cheers. Thank you very much.